Hi everybody and welcome to another digital piano review here at Merriam Pianos. My name is Stu Harrison and today we're going to be looking at Kawai's CA49. This is an instrument that people have been asking us to do for a while, and quite frankly we didn't get the physical instrument until about a month ago. We're finally getting around to it right now. This is a digital piano with the kind of a hybrid wood action on it from Kawai as the manufacturer. Sort of really finds a nice niche right in the kind of middle range of the price range for digital pianos generally. And we're going to have a nice, enjoyable, thorough look at this piano. So we thank you so much for tuning in to learn a little bit more about it. If it's the first time that you have come across the channel and you really enjoy what you see and you find it useful, we'd appreciate it if you did subscribe, become part of our community, comment, get to know a few other members on here. We've got lots of super enthusiastic people who just love learning more about pianos and hearing what's going on in the piano world. So without further ado, let's get started with Kawai's CA49 right away. So let's begin with sound, something I always like to start with. It's what connects you with an instrument. It doesn't matter how great the action is, if the sound just does not feel good, if it doesn't resonate, you're not going to get very far with this as an instrument. So the CA49 is fairly recent. This is a 2020 addition to the Kawai lineup, and for whatever reason, it has taken us a very long time to get them. From what I understand, it's really no more complicated than that they sold a whole lot more than they expected to. And for whatever reason, we always get the short end of the stick up here in Canada when it comes to inventory. So folks down in the States and probably in other parts of Europe and possibly even Australia have been enjoying the CA49 for months and months and months. We, on the other hand, only actually got our paws on the very first ones about a month and a half ago. Go figure. So we are finally getting around to doing a video on it. And the sound, as I mentioned, is where we're going to start. Looking through the spec sheet on the CA49, you would be forgiven if you thought that you were actually looking at the CN29 spec sheet, because in a lot of senses, the circuitry, a lot of the technology behind the CA49 is the CN29. And I have been describing it to people who have asked about the model really as being an upgraded CN29. There's tons of parallels between those two models, but there are some critical differences as well. So let's just quickly knock off the most critical ones. First of all, this has 120 or 192 notes worth of maximum polyphony. That's becoming fairly standard for an instrument in this price range. 256 is pretty much the highest you generally see unless you get into modeling. 128 is sort of, at this point, feels a bit on the low side really for any digital piano, even at a lower price range. So 192 is impressive, but it's not unique by any stretch of the imagination. Most of the digital pianos in this price range from any of the major manufacturers are going to give that to you. Polyphony, for those of you who are just starting to dive into piano world, and this is maybe one of the first videos you've hit, you're going to want to check out the video we've done on polyphony. I don't want to kind of expend any time within this video getting into details, but we'll make sure that the link is handy in the description, or just type, Merriam Pianos polyphony, and you should be able to get a nice description there. So we've got 192 notes worth of maximum polyphony. You've also got 19 voices that are available as well on this, which is exactly the same as what you get on the CN29, and we'll be sampling some of those for you. And what those 192 notes is pushing through is Kawai's tone engine, which they call the progressive harmonic imaging engine. So this is one of their most recent, but it's not their most complex. There's a harmonic imaging XL, which is above that, which sort of starts to get into some modeling. So this is not really a modeling engine, but it is a very, very highly complex kind of sample-based tone engine that Kawai puts in a number of their instruments. So this is the progressive harmonic imaging with 192 notes worth of polyphony. And probably one of the most interesting things about this release of Kawai product, and this includes the 29, the 39, the CA49, 50, all the way up, is this collaboration that they have now with Onkyo. Onkyo is a well-respected high-end audio gear manufacturer, and they make amplifiers. They're going to make crossovers. I think they make speakers and all sorts of different gear for home stereos, for commercial stereos. And the collaboration that they have with Kawai has given Kawai a leg up in a number of areas, from signal processing to amplifier quality to speaker quality. So the main motherboard on this instrument has been co-developed with Onkyo. That gives us the signal processing. It also gives us its own discrete headphone amplifier with settings that allow you to control whether you have a closed or an open style headphone, just for proper dynamic control, as well as some EQ settings in there. But Onkyo now gives us cleaner, punchier amplifiers, and you can really tell the difference when you have a parallel model side by side from Kawai just one generation earlier. We had a CN27 right next to a CN29 for a few months when those two models were kind of in a crossover stage, and the difference was remarkable. And I thought the CN27 was a really great instrument. Side by side though, it's cleaner, it's punchier, it's just a tighter sound out of those Onkyo amplifiers and Onkyo speakers. So that's everything from a sound standpoint on a technical level that the CA49 is going to give you. And so there's some inferred differences also with the CN29. If people are looking at this going, well, if it's so close to the CN29, is it really worth the money to be getting up into the CA49 for those sound things? And in some regards, I guess maybe not. I for sure would say that if you're going to be playing this instrument most of the time without headphones, and you really like the action difference, then the CA49 offers a lot for, relatively speaking, not that much more money than what the CN29 is available for. So I'm going to get into the action a little bit later, but that covers off what those main, I guess, points are on the audio. The polyphony, the fact that we've got the Onkyo componentry, and then from a wattage standpoint, a speaker standpoint, we're dealing with 40 watts of power, 20 watts per side, and 4 speakers instead of just 2 speakers. So you're getting nice clarity out of the top end of the instrument, and then the more punchy sound coming out of the bottom facing 2 speakers as well. So 40 watts of total power out of this instrument. So about the same power actually as what you would get out of the CN29. In terms of what the sound actually is like to play, because let's move past all this technical stuff and really start to enjoy the kind of the more musical side of things. This is equipped with both the SKEX and the EX Grand sample set. What does that mean? Well, the SKEX and EX are 2 different types of concert grands, actual concert grands, nothing to do with digital, that Kawai manufactures. Now the EX is a slightly older, slightly less refined. I think probably most people would agree with that. I'm not disparaging it. It's just it was an earlier generation and just doesn't have the type of color to my ear that the SKEX has, but they both have their place. The EX on its own is a bit more of a poppy sound. It's got a really, really nice, clear, bright treble, but it lacks some of those warmer nuances that the SK manages to get. So they've taken these 2 concert grands and they have done a multi-dimensional sample of that instrument on every individual note. This is somewhat unusual because if you don't really understand or you're new to the world of sampling, it's pretty typical that manufacturers of electronic instruments will not take individual samples of every single pitch. And this is especially true for an acoustic piano because if you really, once you start capturing all the different nuances that you get out of even just a single note when it's played at a pianissimo versus when it's played at a fortissimo, it isn't just volume that's changing. The whole timbre of the note changes as you attack it more quietly and more softly. So by having both individual samples as well as multi-layer samples, you're capturing completely accurate audio information of what's happening at those notes at different volume levels, but also every single note. When you really start to get detailed about it, every single note on a piano may actually have slight unique characteristics to it. And so all of that combined, it's almost the imperfections of what you have in terms of note to note and all of the dynamicism that happens at those different volume levels is pretty difficult to recreate other than through an actual sample. So very long explanation kind of into what sampling really is, but to describe that this is what the CA49 brings to the table. It's not unique within the Kawai line. They do have those sample sets available on other instruments, so you might want to check out some of the other Kawai products and just look to see where it says SKEX or EX sample set. That's what we're talking about. So it has that here. Here's what it sounds like. So that is the SKEX that we are hearing right there. And if we go on to the very next one, we get to the EX Concert Grand. So you can hear there's definitely a character difference between those two. Back to the SK. I'm spending a little more time on those two because honestly, for this particular tone engine, those are the crown jewels. I mean, everything else other than the SK and the EX sample set are going to be much smaller, less complex generated tones on this thing. So the intent of this instrument is clearly to act as a replacement or act as an alternate to a smaller upright piano, where they're thinking that the vast majority of its use is going to be for somebody just enjoying it as a piano. Moving on to some other sounds, you've got an upright sample, kind of just generic upright sample. I've actually no idea what upright it is. It could be a K300, could be K500, who knows? Studio Grand. tremolo grand. Modern piano, who really knows what that means? So when you think about the fact that there's only 19 sounds on here in the first place, and a huge chunk of those 19 are acoustic pianos, it only reinforces my previous point. The Kawai clearly intends this for somebody who's going to be using this, I don't know, 95% of the time for pianistic purposes or acoustic. I think you know what I mean. We get into some classic E-piano. Kind of the standard DX thing. I have to give it to Kawai on this other point too, because I'm not always the biggest fan of some of their alternate sounds other than the piano sounds. Sometimes their strings are a little less textured than what you get on like a Roland. Sometimes their pads aren't nearly as sparkly as what you get on a Yamaha. But even if there's only one jazz organ on the whole thing, that jazz organ is pretty darn solid. You've got the, by default, the left pedal, which is always there as your kind of rotary speaker on-off. And the tone is pretty believable. Church organ. Harpsichord, vibraphone, strings, slow strings, choir. Yeah, and that pretty much rounds it out. So well over half of the 19 are acoustic piano sounds. You've got your standard features. You can always layer them together. You can split it into two. I think there's duet mode as well, so you can have sort of two sections that have the same range assigned to them. There's a few effects on this, and it is compatible with the Virtual Technician. Now, the Virtual Technician is not as cross-compatible as I would certainly like it to be, because it's a really killer app, but at the moment I think Kawai only offers it in to iOS devices running kind of in like iPad kind of mode. That's about it. But for those who have those kind of devices, the Virtual Technician makes this even cooler because you can take those SK Concert Grand and EX Concert Grand and modify them and customize them even more with quite a few parameters. String resonance, damper resonance, key let off, lid, and all sorts of really interesting stuff. So that's our discussion on sound. This is a piano that's certainly capable and has got enough guts to give a really clean, detailed impression of the piano experience. The speakers on the top give it a little more definition to what you're going to get out of, say, the CN29. And we are about to move on to the action, which is the other really great talking point about this instrument. So we'll be right back in just a moment. We're going to throw a few of those sound specs up on the screen for you. Thanks for being with us. The action in the CA49 is called the Grand Feel Compact. Why do they call it compact? Well, it's a shorter key stick, but the configuration, the general configuration, is very similar to what Kawai has been running on their CA series and a few other models for a while, which is basically you've taken a key stick which more or less resembles an acoustic key stick. It's even got a cap stand in the back usually. And then you've got a hammer which has been shaped and graded so that it fairly accurately represents both the static and the dynamic weight and resistance of what you get in a small grand piano. I've made a comment in some of the other videos that since Kawai extended their K-series upright key sticks, the CA series to me actually feels like I'm playing one of the larger K-series uprights to me, which may still in fact, you know, sound or feel rather a little bit like some other grand out there. But I mean, anyway, either way you cut it, this action does give an acoustic feel. It does give an acoustic sound, or an acoustic impression. And whether you think that it's exactly nails a grand or whether it nails an upright, I think is probably a bit immaterial, because to get anything that feels like a real piano of any kind in this price range is pretty cool. And I think it does that remarkably well. The surface of the key is a matte finish, and I like keys with either a bit of texture or matte, which I guess when you think about it, it's matte because it's a bit textured, that otherwise it would be fully reflecting the light. So it's kind of a micro texture on the white key. And then you've got a matte black key finish as well. The key dip on this feels really good. It's a bit of a softer bottom to the key bed than some other digital pianos out there. Specifically Roland. Roland tends to have one of the harder feeling key beds. The Casio GP series, the Claviano Grands kind of sit in between in terms of how spongy or not spongy the action feels at the bottom. Kawai probably has the softest bottom to it to me. And the repetition speed on this is really great as well. So I find that it's very responsive. I do find that the black keys are a bit slippery and you need to play in the instrument for a few hours, kind of similar to like some of those lower cost Casios actually. You do need to get a bit of hand oil on those black keys to just get them a little bit more grippy than you have straight out of the box. So if you're playing one in a store or you order a CA40 and it's like, yeah, it's great, and then you get it home, it's like, wow, those keys are slipped. Just give it a few hours. It's not a big deal. A little bit of hand oil is going to give you the grip that you want and that you need on those black keys for sure. These actions come with a triple sensor, which means that you're going to get really great accurate MIDI output, but it also means that this is built to accommodate some higher level classical playing where you're going to have really fast repeated sections, possibly some very percussive sections where sometimes that dual sensor can throw off some wacky MIDI information and you get kind of some odd spikes. So you've got the triple sensor, you've got the full key length or very close to the full key stick length in here, and you've got the same type of mechanism that you see in the higher CA series, just without quite the same full geometry. So there's what we get on the action of the CA49, which is of course totally different since I have been referencing the CN29 in this video. CN29 uses an RH3, which is a primarily a plastic-based action, which is what they kind of call like the graded hammer action. So the key is hinged basically just behind where you can stop seeing it on the CN29, whereas this one, key goes all the way back. And we'll get some B-roll in there just so you can see exactly what we're talking about with the key action. So thanks so much again for being with us. We're going to take one more super quick break and be back for a last discussion on some of the more, I guess, nuts and bolts stuff about the instrument, connections, finishes, all of that stuff. And we will be right with you. So let's move on to connectivity and some of the other features that we haven't discussed yet. So in terms of connections, this is a little bit light compared to what you're going to get in some of the higher level CA series, some of the higher level Yamaha series or Roland series once you really get up into the top stuff. This is really designed to keep the price point as low as possible, still deliver you a full wood key action, still deliver you a full 88 note sample set with a 4-speaker system. I mean, it's honestly, that you can tell that that's kind of what the mantra of this model has been. So you've got 2 headphone jacks, 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch, and unfortunately there's no way at this point to still keep the local speakers on and have either one of those plugged in. So it is one of those situations where if you want to have some kind of an external speaker, you're going to lose the internals. I'm sure that can probably be remedied with an OS update of some kind. So Kawai, if you're listening, maybe try that out if it's possible. Otherwise, this is no different than what you run into with most other digital pianos, in that you're gonna just have to kind of live with that reality. If something is stuck in those ports, you're losing your local speakers. It has a USB to host, meaning you can plug this into a computer so that you can transmit and receive MIDI through that. It also has Bluetooth MIDI, not Bluetooth audio. If you're not sure what the difference between those two is, you may want to Google that just to be sure, so that you do not get this home. You saw the Bluetooth symbol and all of a sudden you're like, yay, I've got really great Bluetooth headphones and I want to use them now with my CA49. Not going to work. So make sure that you take care to just clarify exactly what that means and what that doesn't mean. This also has an internal recorder, I think 3 songs. So there are times where that can be a really handy way to even just play back what you're practicing so you can hear it. I know people who use it as a practice aid. And then there's a whole bunch of very popular method books that have their repertoire stuffed in here, so you can use this as, again, as kind of a companion device if you're using any one of those repertoire books, like the Alfred stuff, or the Cerny stuff, or the, some of them, honestly, I don't even know how to pronounce it, so I'm not going to make a fool of myself. But you can see the list of those method books on Kawai's website. I think it's probably on our website, a whole bunch of other people's website. So that's more or less a roundup of some of the other features that you get. It does have the basics: metronome, check; transpose, check. It's got some rhythms in there as well that you can access from the metronome menu. And last thing I am going to say is that the CA49 and the CN29 came with a completely redesigned user interface on the left side. Way better than the previous one. Makes very efficient use of the screen. The way that you can navigate through the screen makes a whole lot of sense, because now there's an up and a down kind of cursor that allows you to just move through those menus very, very easily. And they've really been able to cram a lot of functionality while streamlining the physical buttons and just the physical real estate that control panel takes up. This beauty is available in 3 different finishes from Kawai. What you see here, if it's coming through on the camera okay, is rosewood, which is probably the most common. It's kind of the chameleon finish that Kawai says works in the most wide variety of settings. But you can get this in a satin black. You can also get it in a satin white, which is becoming increasingly popular, but you do sort of need the right room for the white to work. It comes with 3 pedals and an integrated stand, and one of the things that Kawai does on all of their home digitals, is it all of them? Certainly from the CN29 up, maybe even the KDP 110, but for sure CN29 up, is it's the grand pedal feel system, which more or less just means that all 3 pedals have the same resistance as what you would normally get on an acoustic grand piano. Those of you who have played an acoustic grand piano will certainly be aware that all 3 of those pedals do not have the same spring resistance. They don't feel the same at all. And so I don't know who had the idea to try and replicate that on these pedals, but it's a really good idea, because if you're practicing on this, especially with classical, where you need to be really rehearsing and creating a lot of muscle habits to get through some of these really complex pieces, having a pedal that behaves and feels the right way is really a great idea. So your left pedal is the most resistant, your right pedal is the second most, and your middle is the lightest, just like your sostenuto, your damper, your sustain pedal, and your unicorda would on a grand. So, I hope you've enjoyed this this exploration of the CA49. Perhaps it's on your list. Perhaps you now know a little bit more about it and understand where it fits in with the rest of the industry. Certainly it's something that, even though we haven't had it for very long, it's already become kind of a bit of a fan favorite here. And the CN29/CA49 comparison is one that we get a lot. So perhaps we're even going to do a video on that in the future. Thank you so much for watching, for tuning in. We hope you have enjoyed it. We hope that you leave us a comment and let us know what you thought of the video, and or any questions. We do our very best to get to as many of those as we possibly can. And if you have not had a chance to subscribe yet, we'd also really appreciate if you did that as well. Just become part of our growing community of piano lovers. What could be more fun than tuning in and learning a little bit about pianos every week? My name's Stu Harrison. This has been Merriam Pianos on YouTube. We will see you back for more videos shortly. Thanks so much for watching.